Okay. And it's 7:04. Maybe we could get started,
Yeah,
right?
we could go.
So I think
Sure.
since there's so few of us and others may come in,
Yep.
um, I think we can raise our physical hand if we want to talk rather than you don't have to use the little doohickey, which is helpful when you have lots of people in the meeting, but I don't think we need that. But
Yeah.
just, people can just raise their hands.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be nice to have John just start out and say a few words or tell us what you imagine.
Sure. Well, this is largely is I asked the coaches what it means. So I'm be open for questions, but I also since we have a specific theme around cross country, a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. I did prepare, um, as Anne is well aware, a sheet on how cross country is scored. Now, I suspect that all five of us here are familiar with that, but a lot of folks who are running cross country with Liberty are not, and they may not be interested, but they may be. And so for those who are asking, how do you score a cross country meet? We're going to talk a little bit about, go through that a little bit. Because some people may not be interested, but I think those of us who ran on a high school or a college team sort of take it for granted in a way. But if you're new to running and new to cross country in particular, it can come off like a foreign language. We can talk a little bit about how cross country is different from other modes, whether it's track, road, cross country, or trail. And I can speak a little bit about why has always been my particular favorite form of racing. And Catherine's getting ready for a marathon here, and we could talk a little bit about how I believe I've always felt when I was running marathons competitively. I've always felt that if I was running a fall marathon, the cross country races were an excellent combination of speed and strength work along the way. So, having said that, Anne, where would you like us or me to begin?
I think it's great to also have part of the discussion be for people who are not so experienced in cross country, because, well, at least one of those people is here in the room, and that is me. And also, there are people who are watching on video who are not in the room. So I
Yeah.
think it's good to talk about these things. And maybe a good place to start would just be what is cross country, or how would you define it, John? Because I know when I joined Liberty, I had no idea what it even was. I had a totally wrong idea. I mean, I knew that my nieces and nephews did, at their school, they did track in one season and cross country in another season. But I just assumed that track, well, I knew what track was, right? But I just assumed that cross country was like, oh, that's when they go out and run half marathons or whatever.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
no idea. So I
Um,
learned, and then there's trail running and there's mountain running and there's all these things. So I'd love to hear your take on it because
Sure.
you
One of my favorite anecdotes about that, and in fact, when I was trading emails with Christine a few days ago, she said she has cited the same anecdote with her own beginners team at Mass Bay Community College. The great Alda and Karen will remember this name, and Catherine, you may not, and Anne, you probably will not, but the great Jim Ryan, the
Oh, yeah.
last American man to hold the world mile record.
Mhm.
He started out as a high school freshman. He went out for cross country because he wasn't good at other sports. He was kind of uncoordinated and ungainly, but he didn't really know what it was. Same as a lot of people. He just sort of heard about it and it had to do with running, but didn't really know what it was. And that was his path into running and eventual greatness and immortality, if you will. And I remember being in eighth grade. I had been exposed to high level track and field for a number of years through my father. But I remember standing in recess one day at eighth grade, and I could look across. It was a Friday, and I could look across the creek that divided our school from the Stanford golf course. And suddenly I saw all of these runners flash by off in the distance, about 800 yards away. And I thought that must be cross country, but I still don't really know what they're doing. But I suddenly it kindled a flame that was what I was going to be doing the following fall, and I really wanted to get started as soon as I can. Um, I took to cross country because I had no basic speed and was not nearly as good. I was much better at cross country than at track. And because it was a fall sport, not a spring sport, that was the first sport in high school that I went into, and I just loved the atmosphere about it. It was the community, the places that we went to run. It was everything that I had hoped for and more. And I was a little intimidated. No, I wasn't a little intimidated. I was a lot intimidated. But I found my place with cross country. So the name comes from, it's a European sport in origin. The name cross country is probably English. The phrase, the term, the nickname of harriers is certainly English. Harriers, as many people know, is a raptor. It is a bird of prey. And I don't know the exact etymology, whether it has to do with soaring over open countryside, but that works at any rate. And so I love that cross-country runners have their own particular nickname. They are harriers, and whereas people that are mountain runners, trail runners, road runners, track runners are not harriers. So that's, and it has a long tradition. New England is where cross-country running began in this country, and it is where it's still the strongest. Us being part of the New England Association means that we are in the most active area for cross-country, whether you want to be competitive or non-competitive, in all of the United States of America. And we think we have it rough on some of our courses, but go over to Europe sometime. We have the occasional hay bale to jump over in some of ours, but we don't have fences to clamber over, stiles to clamber through, or creeks to wade. Sometimes if you run a cross-country race in Europe, and particularly the UK, you might have cows staring at you half the time. So fortunately, we've gotten away from running all of our cross-country races on golf courses. We were overly groomed 30 or 40 years ago, and now we have places like Franklin Park. And even when we run on a former golf course, such as Brown Bear in Attleboro, it is not a groomed golf course. It's a thicker grass, return to the wild type of course. So we're getting better at that in this country. But
so should we bring
on a bit here? So tell me where I should go.
Should we bring on the hay bales? What is your opinion? Do you think there should be more obstacles or more?
Well, I think if those of us who have run at Club Nationals expect hay bales.
Really?
Especially if it is not a naturally hilly course or a naturally woody course. Yeah, they often throw out hay bales at those things. Yeah.
You have to like jump over it, or can you step over it?
They're not too high. They're not too high. There's usually maybe about a foot high. Maybe foot and a half at most, but
yeah, you can step on them and go across.
You can step on it. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not like horse jumping where you can't touch it.
No, not like that kind of a steeplechase barrier. No. And the other thing is, depending on where you go, if at Club Nationals, when they're in December, you could be dealing with snow and slush, as we very often have. So that's an added factor that makes cross country different. I like to think of cross country actually as the ideal blend. Mountain and trail running are largely, you get in one slow gear and you navigate it in that one slow gear. Track there's gear changing in track, especially with longer distances, but it's largely, you wind it up and go, as Alden knows. And road running, yes, it has gear changing, but you're on that road surface 99% of the time. Cross country has different elevation, different surfaces, but it's not a 10-mile or 8-mile, 12% grade like Mount Washington is. And so you have different gears, you have different speeds, it's mentally engaging, and you're in a beautiful environment in the best time of the year, in my opinion, for running. And so I think it's the best of all worlds combined. You have speed, you have strength, you have endurance, and you have to stay mentally engaged. You cannot go to sleep in a cross-country race.
Yeah, the surfaces change. You go from grass to gravel to, you might have to cross over a paved area and then hit the grass again. And so you don't, in road racing, to me, you find a pace that you can continue, and you try to maintain that pace. You find something that's a sort of a comfortable, but you can't do that in cross country. It just changes too much. You're always adjusting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hello, Carlin.
Hi, Carlin.
Hi, everyone. Just came from a cross-country race, but wanted to see your faces.
Oh,
Good. Glad you're here.
Great. Yeah.
Well,
Were you coaching?
No, no, sort of. My
Sort of.
kids were running and I was helping out, but
Sure, sure.
Great. Yeah. Another thing that I've heard about cross country, and I think this is true, is that the spectators run about as much as the runners,
Yes,
you know?
yes.
And I remember doing that once. There was one race when I was not running for some reason, and I was there, and Jan was there, and Jan and I ran all over the place we'll go here, and then we'll go there, and then we'll see them do this, and we'll see them over here. And, you know, I'm like, Jan, I thought we were supposed to not be running, but we were running everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
that
too
happens.
much, yeah.
I will not dwell on this because I can tell old stories, you know, all day long, and so can Alda and so can Karen. But the greatest just two-person race that I've ever seen, and don't expect to see its like ever, was when I was a sophomore in high school. It was then the Pacific 8 Conference Championships on the Stanford Golf Course, a couple miles from where I grew up. And some people remember the name Jerry Lindgren, not everybody, but he was a senior at Washington State. He never lost an NCAA championship race, and a freshman from Oregon by the name of Steve Prefontaine, who most people do know. And Prefontaine had been the upstart and beaten Lindgren the previous week up in the Northwest. And at this race, Prefontaine took off like a shot out of a cannon, like he always did. Lindgren eventually caught up with them, and they spent the entire 6 miles just going back and forth at one another. And my friends from high school and I were running all over the frickin' Stanford Golf Course to get as many places to see that race as we could. And yeah, we got not quite as good a workout as they did, but a pretty darn good workout.
And
Yeah.
who won?
There are photos, and I will attach a photo at some point for everybody to look at for the club. They finished. We saw them coming down the last fairway. We said, "Who's going to sprint? Who's going to sprint?" We realized they aren't sprinting. They're spent. They're exhausted. They've been beating each other, hammering each other the entire race, and they finished shoulder leaning on shoulder. They gave it to Lindgren, presumably because he was a senior, but they should have called it a tie.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
What a thing.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's another question that we don't have to go into, but when I was watching the Olympics, I was interested in what constituted getting over the finish line first, like what part of your body. And I always assumed it would be the feet, but evidently it's not.
The
Nope.
torso,
So,
torso.
yeah.
That's why they breast the tape at the end and they practice that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it can be your neck.
Yeah.
I think I'm right about that. I know the rules have changed a little bit, but I think the neck counts. But yes, you can't throw your arms out.
So your arms don't count.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And your head?
Your head, no. I think it starts here. The
Oh,
rules
okay.
may be, in Alda, you may be more current with the rules than I am. It may be the actual torso, but I think the neck counts.
Yeah, not sure. I thought it was torso, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've always heard torso.
yeah. It has changed over the years a little bit, so I may be thinking what it was in 1968 or something.
I remember one time I had to officiate a track. Years ago, I was the athletic trainer at Dover Sherburne High, and they wanted me to double as an official. So I had to read the book, and they had the honest effort rule. Like you have to give an honest effort, and two people, this is a track meet. They can't hold hands at the end, because if they did, they're obstructing, and also because if they did, probably one wasn't
Right.
trying as hard as they could. Different rules, but I remember that breasting the tape.
Yeah,
But that was 1984, so I don't know.
Yeah.
If it changed.
that's right.
but I think in cross country you can kind of run hand in hand if you want to. Like I've seen people do that when like celebratory, like go over the finish line at the same time. But
I think it would depend on the competition. But I don't think they would let you do that at a state level meet, but probably at a lower level meets, if it's not affecting the outcome of the meet, it's probably okay. They'll
So like
probably
a
overlook
fun
it.
run, fun road race, they wouldn't care.
Yeah.
Talking about like track, a serious track meet.
And tell me when I should start talking about scoring.
Let's
You want to get
start
that out of the
talking
way, or do you
about-
want to delay it till later?
Because the sheet you gave us is so full of detail, and the links too are interesting. And I have some questions, and I'm sure this is all very familiar to most of you. But I found it cleared up a whole lot of things that I had. Also, it raised some more questions. Right, I have other questions. Okay, so let me share my screen. This is a wonderful document that John made up. And here we go. Wait, I'm going to do this because then I can, okay, there we go. So can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, I can see it.
Can you read it?
Yes,
Okay, good.
I just need my readers.
Yeah, I know, I made the print,
Yeah.
I made the print bigger, but I can make it even bigger. If you
Oh,
want.
no, it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I like this part, actually. I like this part a lot.
Well, Because I realize that for those of us that you know grew up with the scoring as part of it, you know, when you go out for a sport in high school, whether it's basketball or wrestling or field hockey or whatever it is, you know, they keep score and it's competitive. So that was part of what cross country is. But I also realized that for a number of people in Liberty who we encourage to run cross country and try it, that's not their thing. So I want my hope is that people enjoy the sport of cross country for what it is, irrespective of the scoring aspect of it. But for those that are interested in the score, I think it adds a dimension to it that I think makes the sport absolutely fascinating. So there we are.
Yeah,
It's also say,
Sorry.
I'd also say, John, that, you know, everyone counts. Like a lot of times people think they don't count, but
Mhm.
they do.
Yep.
And you don't have to be first to help out the team.
That's right. That's right. As you will discover as you go through
yes,
this.
we will, yes, we will discover.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is the second slide, so to speak. Okay, take it away, John.
Um,
Yeah.
this is kind of an introduction. It seems at its essential basic level, cross country is very simple. You add up the places and low score wins. So if you have just two teams in a dual meet, it's pretty simple. Especially if the top 10 runners, 5 from each team, constitute the scoring. So here you have, that's as close that when you add up places 1 through 10, you get a total of 55. So in a pure situation, you have 55 points. So 28-27 is the closest possible. A perfect score, as it says at the very bottom, is if a team gets all the first 5 places, they sweep it. That's 15 points, and it leaves 40 points for the other team. In high school and often in college, even meets that have a lot of teams involved, coaches will break down the entire big meet as if it were a series of dual meets. So if there are 4 teams, or let's say there's 7 teams in a meet, coach of team 1, when he looks at the results, or she, will pull out the results from each team and score it as if it was just those 2 teams, if that makes sense. But that's the basic of it. But here's where it gets a little more complicated. You want to
Yeah.
continue on there?
Yes.
All right. Now, a team's 6th and 7th runners, if they have more than 5, and most teams do, they can displace runners in the top 5 from another team. And I don't think I worded that quite correctly. I said another team's top 5 runners. They don't have to finish ahead of all of them, just any of them. So in this example, you see that through the first 3 places anyway, that team 2 is well ahead. Through 3 places, team 2 has 8 points and team 1 has 13. So looks like team 2 is well on its way to winning the meet. Except for their 4th runner finishes behind all 7 of team 1's runners. The 9th and 10th place runners for team 1, they don't count, they don't score as 9 and 10, but they push back the runners from team 2 so that their 4th and 5th runners now score 11 and 12. And that makes the difference for team 1 to come from behind and win. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
For all of us experienced folks? And if I'm not saying it clearly, I'm trying to say it so that people who watch this afterwards who are not familiar with scoring will get it. So
Okay.
if I'm not saying it clearly enough, please feel free to clarify me.
Okay, so team 2's 11 and 12 don't end up adding, they detract from the score. They don't add anything to it. I mean, they're a dead weight, right? Or-
Team 2's 11 and 12 do count in their scoring.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have that 9 and 10 pushing them back,
Mhm.
their places would be 9 and 10,
Right,
and the score would be different.
right,
They
right, right.
would win the meet by 1 point.
Okay, right.
A lot of times, Dan, I think people look at someone and they're like, they got first and second, and they just assume, and first, second, and fifth, wow, they're gonna win the meet. Like, they see them come in, they think like, oh, they must have won. But what happened was the fifth runner is really a key person. And in this situation, the fifth runner for the team that everyone thought would win came in behind the sixth and the seventh runner. So they end up having more points.
Yes, yes.
So you can't think about it. You want less points, and they got more because they were after them.
There's a
Mhm.
common phrase in cross country, and Carlin, you'll be familiar with this, is that you're only as good as your fifth runner. And as we shall see, it's not always your fifth runner. Sometimes it's your sixth or your seventh. But that's why having a well-balanced team can make a very big difference, can be very important. And as Carlin says, you can have 2 or 3 really fast runners, but if you don't have them, the balance to back them up, you may be out of luck.
So you can have Parker Valby, beat everybody by 5 minutes, but if you don't have a good fifth runner, then,
Yeah, and as I mentioned a little bit later on, those first 2 runners can finish 30 seconds in front of everybody else, but it's by place and not time. So that 30 seconds doesn't matter. It's still just places, it's still just 1 point and 2 points.
Okay. So another moral of the story is if you're in first place or second place, you don't need to try to set a PR or whatever, as long as you're ahead of everybody else, right?
Right. That's right. That's right. Whereas in a road race, where scoring is done by time, every second makes a difference. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. In case of a tie, the sixth runner.
Yes, if there is a tie, the sixth runner can become the tiebreaker. And in this particular example, the sixth runner is both the tie creator and the tiebreaker. And that happens where, see if I can get this right. Well, I'll just read this and see if it makes sense to you. The 10th place finisher, the number 6 runner from team 2, they're next to the number 8. So the top 5 finishers for team 1 are 1, 2, 5, 9, and 11. For team 3, they're 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8. So they're tied. Now that 6th runner from team 2 finished ahead of the 5th runner for team 1. So that pushes that runner back. So it's not 27-28 anymore. It's a 28-28 tie. Now, then it becomes which 6th runner finished ahead of the other. And since team 2's 6th runner finished ahead of team 1's 6th runner, that breaks the tie. So even though the score is 28-28, team 2 wins because their 6th runner finished ahead of team 1's 6th runner.
It's like you go head to head on when you get to the 6th runner. Whichever 6th runner came in, if it's a tie, whichever 6th runner came in before this actually happened last year to Needham and Braintree girls. They went to the 6th runner. It was a tie.
And I cite an example a little bit later on where that happened at the state meet level. Yeah.
Okay, now it gets really complicated.
So much for dual meets. We don't do any dual meets. All the meets we go to, there are a whole bunch of teams together, just like at Greater Boston last week and at Brown Bear will be next week. So that's where it gets a little bit different. In our competition, and at least in USATF New England competition, only women's open teams score 5. All of the older age divisions, 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus, 70 plus, you only need 3 to score. So in that case, if you have 2 fast runners, it probably does really help. But any runners, then you still, in both, whether it's 3 to score or 5 to score, you still have your 2 displacers. But if you don't have the minimum number, if you don't have 3 for masters and over, or 5 for open, you don't count in the scoring at all. The computer will just pull you out and not count those runners. So again, there's a link a little bit where you can see how, in a little bit where you can see how that works. But the example I cite is, and I just pulled this out of a hat, if a runner finishes 42nd in the race overall, but 10 of those runners were from incomplete teams, those 10 are pulled out, and that runner would score 32 points overall. Yeah. And the example I used was from the All-State meet in 2014, 10 years ago, simply because the tiebreak example on the boys' side works really well. That's one I remember quite vividly. So I use that. But this is, you can see, if you look where runners from incomplete teams are factored out and do not count in the scoring in that far right-hand column under the word points.
Wait, John, little Needham lore. Margie Cullen, who came in third. My
Mhm.
daughter, one of my daughters is currently wearing her spikes.
I
Oh,
love it. I
great,
love stories like that.
great.
I
10
see
years
one of
later,
my
she's wearing
teammates
her-
from Newton North that I ran with too, actually, on these
Nice,
results.
nice. I love it.
Really?
Nice.
There
Yeah,
you
you know
go,
it.
Catherine. That's awesome.
Catherine, you might be on one of these lists.
That's
You'll-
right.
Maybe
should-
not at the All-State meet, but yeah.
I should check out some of those old results and find folks.
Yeah, we'll find you.
Yeah.
Well, now I understand, because I was trying to decipher the cross-country results from our most recent one, and I noticed that in this far right column, there was a descending numerical order, but that there were a lot of blanks.
A lot of blanks.
And
Yeah.
I thought, well, why are these people not being included? But now
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. At the open level, where there's a lot of competitors.
Hey, John, who won it?
Hmm?
Yeah, you gotta scroll down. Who
Well, I
won it?
didn't include the team results for the girls simply because that wasn't the example I was trying to show in this
Oh,
one.
all
I
right.
include, you can go look it up though.
Yeah, I think it was.
Here,
I
here's
don't know
the
whether Needham won or not. I think that might have been a Needham year because Needham was really
I
strong.
think it was. I think they
Mhm.
won that year.
Mhm.
I'll put the link in.
Thanks.
Yeah. You can look it up. Let us know. You can report back. So, okay, now, let's see, where are we? So next example is the boys Division II team scores from the
Yeah.
same meet.
And this is where the tie break comes in. I remember this very, very well at Franklin Park. So yes, if you look at that, you had three teams very, very close together. You had Marblehead and with 132, and then you had Newburyport and Hopedale tied at 125. And this was so interesting. This is interesting on a lot of different levels. And this is where I just think the texture of team scoring in cross country is fascinating. Through the first four runners, Newburyport has a solid advantage. They're 9 points ahead. So they just need their fifth runner to finish 8 or fewer places closer, not more than 8 places behind the fifth Hopedale runner. Well, they finished 9 places behind the Hopedale runner. Hopedale runner finished 45. Newburyport runner finished 54th. So it's tied through 5 places, 125, 125. So then it goes to the 6th place tiebreak. And it's very clear. The Hopedale 6th runner comes in right behind his team's 5th runner in 47th place, whereas the Newburyport 5th runner is much further back in 98th. Tie broken. Hopedale gets the win. And as you can see, Marblehead, if I didn't really tease it out, but through the first 3 or 4 places, Marblehead is right in the mix as well, until falling off. Now, one of the things that I found fascinating, and you can see it on here, I didn't include it in my written part, is if you go over to right next to the team names, right between the team name and the point total, you have what's called total time and average. And total time is if this were a road race, and the time, cumulative time was what was important. Well, you can see that Newburyport not only would have won, but Hopedale would have finished 3rd behind Marblehead.
Well,
If you did it by time instead of place. So that's where cross country is different from road and other forms of racing. And am I confusing people at this point? Because there's one other feature about cross
I was going
country.
to ask about that actually, because I was
Yeah.
going to say, but wait, Newburyport had a faster time.
Yeah, that's just there for informational purposes. That doesn't
Yeah.
affect the scoring at all.
Yeah.
The other thing that coaches look at and teams look at and is not indicated on here, I think they do it more often now, is the time difference between the first runner and the fifth runner. It's called the spread.
Okay.
And I was curious about that, so I looked at it here. So the idea is if you're a well-balanced team, you have a tight spread. You don't have much difference between your first runner and your fifth runner. So sometimes that means if they're all way, way at the back, it doesn't do you any good. They can all come across the line within 10 seconds of each other, but if they're, in the last 10% of the field, it's not going to help. But if you're a team that's wanting to do well, and your fifth runner is reasonably close to your first runner doesn't always have to be in the top 10 even. If they're well balanced in the middle, that can make a difference. So I was curious here. Hopedale, and then this is to their credit as to why they packed so well. It's called packing sometimes. They were only 42 seconds between their first and their fifth runner. That's extraordinary. Any team at this level that gets their 5 runners within a minute is doing really, really well. Now, Newburyport and Marblehead were also doing really well at 1 minute and 39 seconds between first and fifth for Newburyport and just 1:37 for Marblehead. At this level, anything within 2.5 minutes, I believe, is a quality effort, or at least 2 minutes is a quality effort. So those 3 teams packing that tightly, and with Hopedale being less than a minute, only 42 seconds, as I say, that's extraordinary. So if you're looking at diagnostics as to the tail of the tape, how they won the meet, that's how they won the meet.
Well, it's just insane because their first runner came in 10th.
Mm-hmm.
And Newburyport's was first and Marblehead's was second. And
Yeah.
normally, I would imagine in most cases, the winning team does have the first or second or third runner, right?
In big meets like this, if you have a runner placed in the top 5, that is a huge advantage if your team is reasonably well balanced. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but the spread was much bigger. I mean, the 6th runner in Newburyport was 98th, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Carlin says it's called compression too.
Compression. Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And the 6 and 7, everyone counts. Everyone counts in cross country.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, and I think I mentioned this in the write-up as well. It is true that quantitatively, any runners on a team that are outside of that top 7 for their team do not factor in the scoring. You don't go to 8th and 9th and 10th for displacing. So those runners are actually factored out in the scoring. But as I tried to suggest at the very beginning, team scoring isn't everything in cross country. I think the essential part of it for someone coming into the sport who is new, I mean, that's one of the things, Maria comes to all of these races. She's a regular cross country runner, and she's not likely to be in the top, since she's over 40, in the top 3 for the team, but she's there and she's running as hard as she can. And I think I've mentioned this previously, but at the Old Goat meet, she and Cindy Hastings from Greater Boston came in, and Cindy had probably a 20 or 30 meter lead with 200 to go. And Maria just put her head down and caught Cindy coming on the last, 20 meters. So she raced it as hard as she could. She raced the course. She didn't factor into the scoring, but I think we all felt that she was as much an example for the rest of us as anybody else that was out there.
Yeah, that's a really great example. I remember at that race, I didn't see that happen, but at that race, we were warming up and Mary Cass said, cross country is real simple. You don't have to win. All you have to do is beat the person in front of you. Catch up to the person in front of you from the other team. Like you keep an eye out who is ahead of you and you get ahead of them.
That's right.
That's right. I mean, that's a very simple way to look at it, but it works,
Yeah. So I've been rambling on, talking at length here and explaining stuff. Does anybody that's present have any questions, or do want to bring up a different aspect of cross country? Or are we done with? I don't want to belabor the scoring part of it, so I don't want to dwell on it all night. Catherine's got her hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what your thoughts were on the distances for like the championship races because I personally like longer races, so I was always a little annoyed that the guys could run longer distances for
Yeah.
cross country championships. So I think it's like usually 6K for women and then 8K or 10K for men.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, yeah, I was kind of curious if you knew how those distances were decided.
Well, it's evolved over time, and I don't know, frankly, where the 6K came from. Um, because 5K is the ubiquitous distance for high school, uh, and so many of the non-championship races, such as Greater Boston and Wayland, are 5K, 5K for men and women. At the championship level, there used to be a really strange wrinkle, Catherine, up until about probably 10 years ago. For whatever reason, it just was a holdover from archaic rules. Open women in a championship race ran 6K. Masters women over 40 ran 10K. And they finally said, that's really dumb. So rather than make it all 10K, they evened it up at 6K. When I turned 60 and I'd go to nationals, I stopped running 10K and started running 8K. I'm not complaining too much. I actually quite like the 8K distance, but I can very much understand. And I think that's a conversation that will be had increasingly as years go on. Anne and Alda sat through the interminable tail end of the USATF annual meeting on Sunday, where they talked about sending delegates to the annual meeting, which is the most boring part and the most laborious part of that annual meeting. But it can make a difference because that's where rule changes get brought up and discussed and potentially made. So if enough people feel strongly about something like that, that's where they would go to do it.
I remember.
That's actually come up online. People were talking about having a 10K for women, that women should be running the same as men. Why aren't women running the same as men? Why don't we have like a decathlon for women? Why do we have to have, a heptathlon? Why women are pole vaulting now? Why don't we have a decathlon? Why aren't the women running? So it's actually been a big discussion about having the women run the same as the men in cross
I
country.
remember, like around 2000, 2003, they had many different distances for cross-country nationals. Like they had the 5K, the 6K, the 8K, and the 10K. Remember they did all of those. And I think like in the 80s, they used to have a 5K, like for New England Championship. I think at one time it used to be the 5K, and then maybe sometime in the 90s they switched it to a 6K, which to me always seemed like an odd distance because I never see it except in cross country usually.
Yeah.
Usually it's
The evolution and growth of women's distance running has been uneven, Catherine. And Karen and Alda will remember this, but up until through the Olympics of 1968, the longest women's distance was 800 meters, which one of the women pioneer runners and one of my heroes, Doris Brown Heritage, she was denied a few Olympic medals because she was a world cross country champion and a great road runner, but she could only run 800 meters at the Olympics. In 72, they bumped it up to 1,500 meters, but it wasn't until 12 years later that they added the marathon with nothing else in between.
Yeah.
So eventually they added a 3,000, and for a while it was 1,500, 3,000, and a marathon. And then they finally got wise and went to the same distances that the men run, 5,000 and 10,000.
So
but
the
it took a
10K
while.
came after the marathon?
Yeah. There was because by that time, by 1980, women's marathoning was exploding. Yeah.
It wasn't until Barcelona, wasn't it, that the 10K was part of it? There was they were having exhibition 10Ks, but they said there had to be enough world participation to be able to say that it's an Olympic event. And the marathon took off and people were running the marathon, so they could put that into the Olympics, but it took time to get a world participation, enough women worldwide to constitute a 10K. And it wasn't until Barcelona that they had a 10K.
And that's where Arlene Jennings won the
Yeah.
bronze medal. Yeah.
Yeah.
In that event.
You know, I was reading
So,
this
so
very-
maybe Catherine, you'll see the women's 10K in cross country.
Yeah.
I would love that. I mean, that would
Mhm.
definitely motivate it me to run more cross country. I think.
I would hate it.
Everyone's
Need to
different,
have-
right? Like the shorter distances kind of catered to, like, I don't know, more middle distance runners, shorter event runners, and then I feel like the true distance runners always prefer to run longer.
Yeah.
But
But I would
Yeah.
still run cross country because I think it is valuable. I think the
yeah,
endurance,
definitely.
the strength, it really does, it does give you a base. I always think of it as a baseline. And I think it's really important to run as part of the season.
Yeah, I think when I'm not training for a marathon, I would love to do more cross country. And I know, John, you mentioned that you do like incorporating cross country into your marathon training. So yeah, we'd love to hear you talk more about that at some point.
And I will acknowledge that as a man, when I was doing, in my prime years and training for serious marathons, I had more access to 10K cross country races. And that's fabulous marathon training.
Yeah, I remember in the year 2000, they had a cross-country 10K nationals in Franklin Park.
Yep, I still have the coffee mug from that.
Oh, yeah. So they have been doing it, and I think
Yeah.
it-
But that was, again, women didn't run 10K. That was men.
but no, we did. I ran in it.
You ran 10K?
Yeah, I ran it. I remember the year 2000. I ran a
Okay.
10K in Franklin Park, and it was the nationals. But they had there was a 5K, and not all on the same day. Like different places and dates, they would have a 5K, I think a 6K, an 8K, and 10K. So you could run like 4 different cross country nationals theoretically if you wanted to. And I remember Mary Harada saying, "Oh, I hated that," but I always remember that I had done like the 5K and the 10K nationals like within a week of each other. And I got, my pace was faster in the 10K because the 5K was Homedale Park and it was very steep and hilly. Like Franklin Park was hilly, but I remember Homedale, New Jersey, it was very steep and hilly. And so you got a slower time. It's funny, but I do remember.
It's interesting. I didn't realize that there was a women's 10K cross country nationals at any point.
Yeah, in the year 2000.
So there you are, Catherine. There's precedent.
Yeah, they did have it, and for
Yeah.
some reason they dropped it, but no, like around 20 years ago, like around 2000, early 2000s. They
Yeah,
did
and
have
in
it.
2000 they were at Franklin Park. Incidentally, for those that don't know, there were a handful of cross country venues in this country that are kind of iconic. The most iconic one would be, I think most people would acknowledge, is Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx in New York. But Franklin Park, Golden Gate Park in San Francisco are probably next in line for icon status. And they used to run on the golf course at Franklin Park, and I'm glad that they don't do that anymore. But yeah, Franklin Park has hosted national championships several times, and the World Championships in 1992.
Yeah, I was there, I
You
saw
can
it.
find the YouTube of the last 4 minutes of that race, and I finally figured out where the finish was. They actually come into White Stadium and finish in the
Yeah.
stadium. Yeah,
Yeah, I was there. I saw it. I saw
I'm
it.
sure you were.
Yeah, it was so exciting. Yeah.
I actually ran a Van Cortlandt this summer just for just for
Nice.
fun. And yeah, that was definitely the hardest course that I've run on for cross country. I don't know how people actually race it because it's just so up and down, and there's a lot of steps throughout
I've
the
heard that.
course.
I've never run that course,
With
but
a
yeah.
ton of steps, right, Catherine?
Yeah, I will say I tend to be more conservative on downhills because I roll my ankle a lot. And there were just a lot of up and down parts, and yeah, I don't know how people just fly through that course because it definitely seemed challenging. And I saw, Carlin, that you linked this article from, was it St. Michael's
Yeah,
College?
so the St. Michael's
yeah.
coach is very into
Yeah.
equity and all genders running the same distance. And so she's done that 8K, I guess, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years. I don't know. She just should. I've never run in it, but she talked about it when we were up there, like at one
That's
point.
awesome. Yeah.
Yes. I'm just now looking at the chat. There's been a lot of comments, so I missed most of them. Yeah. Well, there you go.
I like that. I wondered, that was actually one of the first things I wondered about when I started cross country, is why we ran 5 or 6K and the men ran 8K, at least on some certain races.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, when is it? Scroll down, Ann. Is it in October? Or did they already do it? They probably already did it.
18. Wait, no. That's today.
Oh, was it today?
It says 9/18.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I remember that. I remember her talking about it at one point, and then so it's Saturday. Yeah,
Nope.
invitational.
Wait. I don't know when I don't know when it is. But anyway, here's the article.
Interestingly enough, though, that since they're running the same distance, I guess I find it interesting that they're not just running everyone together. Like, why isn't it just all genders? If you run the same distance, you can score it differently if you want to,
I guess
but
it depends on the course and how narrow it is too, because I think
yeah, you might have too many
Yeah.
kids.
yeah, that's the only
But
thing
I
can
feel
think-
like I
yeah.
feel like cross country could be one of the best, like, inclusive aspects of our sport for all genders.
Mhm.
Like, you just run the race and everyone runs and you can score it afterwards. But
John, do you have a favorite cross country race that you've run on, or like favorite course?
Oh, having grown up in the San Francisco area, there's a course, and I should have added this to the list actually, because it has that semi-icon status. There's a course on the San Francisco Peninsula in the town of Belmont called Crystal Springs, and that has hosted national championships before. And they changed the course after my freshman year in high school. The last half mile used to be back and forth up these switchbacks, and with a wicked downhill right in the middle of it. And then they kind of, I won't say evened it out, but they got rid of the switchback part of it. But yeah, that course is still being used, and I love that course. It's very Western. There's not a lot of trees around. You're kind of it's mostly kind of rocky dirt trail, a little bit dusty.
isn't that where
but-
McFarland USA was?
Sorry? Oh no, this is the McFarland USA was in the valley, in the Central Valley. And this
But
is
their race,
near
their
the
big
coast.
race,
Sorry?
the big race in the movie, one of the big races.
I don't think that was Crystal Springs. That might have been. I think it was there's a place in Fresno called Woodward Park that hosts a lot of big meets. I think that's where that was held in real life. But I love Franklin Park. I've run Franklin Park so many times. The 8K course there, I absolutely love. And so those two and Golden Gate Park in San Francisco have special places for me. Yeah.
So this is definitely a situation where if you're coming to run a cross country race and you've never run the course, you're traveling, you would want to get there a couple of days early, right? And get to know the course.
If you're out there if the race is on a Saturday and you're out there at about 9 a.m. Friday, you'll see all kinds of clubs and people out there checking out the course. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, the worst one that I remember was running in Texas, which you might, yeah, and it's clay.
Mhm.
And I had never run on clay, how it sticks to your shoes
Yeah.
until you feel like you're Herman Munster with like these. Anyway, so they wet down the course and there's this big blob of water. And I noticed that all the guys in front of me, everybody's running around it. I was like, what's the matter with these people from Texas? I just run through the water, right?
Yeah.
So I went running through this clay mud pit. And as I was running, more clay kept getting stuck to my shoes and stuck to my shoes. And this case of clay, my feet, I couldn't even pick up my feet after a while. So it's important to know the course
Yeah.
and the conditions, because I was a mess. It was the worst, it was the worst race I ever ran.
On this and the same
Also,
vein,
ask a local, right, Alda? Ask a local. Don't just read a course chart or whatever. Find whoever's the local person, and when they go to do their walkthrough with their team, just
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it, like when we go to like in Washington, we're going to be going to Washington. I think it's important to get there so that you can like check out the course and run through it. And we did that in Bethlehem when we went down. I think it's important. It's totally different, totally different.
And you never know what in different parts of the country, what weather can be like. In 2008 in Spokane, we ran in a blizzard. You could hardly see very far in front of you. In 1985, back when I was younger and faster, nationals were in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it rained for 3 days straight. And they had youth races the whole day before the Open Championship races. And so for a quarter mile at the start, it was just soup, just mud soup entirely. And you did that 3 times around. So everybody was splashing through it. Nike used an ad with Pat Porter, the men's winner, and Lynn Jennings, the women's winner, covered in mud as part of their Just Do It thing. And that became kind of a famous runner's advertisement for several years.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
did tell me.
Couple years
they
ago.
called the clay caliche, Anne, but I had no idea what they were talking about. They were saying,
Called
"Oh,
it
look,
what?
Caliche
Caliche.
in San Antonio." And there
Okay.
was the clay that these guys, oh, the caliche. And I was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And I should have like really checked it out.
I don't know that word either. And then a
Um,
couple years ago, y'all were out in San Francisco for the national cross country nationals, and a tree fell down.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, not causing any injuries, but
Right, yeah.
Yes, and as climate change moves ahead, I think we can expect more oddities like that in the future. You know,
You know,
I hope we just don't get flooded out or something like that at some point.
but I would have
definitely.
definitely run through that puddle, because my second cross country race, my first cross country race, I'm just trying to keep my feet dry, or I don't know what I'm trying to do. I have no idea. And then the second one, I'm running behind Carla, and it was Rachel's run, and there was not a huge puddle, but it went all the way across the entire trail. And I think you could kind of hear me behind you, kind of slowing down. And you said, just go right through it. And you ran right through the middle. And then I ran right through the middle, and it was marvelous. And I realized, yes, that's what you do, unless you're in San Antonio.
Yeah.
I remember one time I was in Rochester. It was the 8K cross country nationals, and I think Genesee Valley Harriers.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so there was this part of the course where because it was raining, and you had to go uphill on mud. And there was this woman, and I think she was like in her 70s or 80s or something, and she was struggling to get up the hill. And then there was this man, and I think he felt bad, and he was like kind of pulling her up. And I thought, well, normally you wouldn't be able to do that, but I don't think anyone would, disqualify her. I don't think anyone saw it except me, but that's how hard it was for her to get up, because
Yeah.
it was uphill on mud. And then I think I ran a little to the side so it wasn't so muddy or something. I got up. But, well, that was the first time I saw
That's why I say in cross country you gotta be thinking all the time. Sometimes you have to make these snap decisions. Do I go through it? Do I go around it?
Yeah.
If it's on a tilt, like some of the trails at Old Goat were, do you run to the side, or do you run in the middle? There, people were, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I think one time Mary Harada decided not to run cross country. I think all of you were there, was it in Spain? And she said that it was more like a trail run, and she thought it was too rough. And
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Mary Harada factors in one of my favorite cross-country anecdotes since I've been part of Liberty, and this is one of the last ones that she ran, if not the last one, in Franklin Park. Some of you may remember this. She was obviously not anywhere near the front. She was way in the back. I don't think she was the last finisher, but she was not far from it. And in Franklin Park, you might remember, towards the end, with about a half mile to go, as you're starting to go around Playstead Field, you come out of the wilderness, you come around the field, and you make a left turn around a tree with a real significant drop, really short but steep. And Mary's walking down that thing. And I hear one of the officials at the finish line yell over to her, "Come on, Mary, you can run down that." And she looks over and says, "I didn't run down that damn thing 20 years ago. You think I'm going to now?"
and she was probably like in her 80s at that point, right?
I'm sure she was over 80. Well, yeah.
Maybe 84. Maybe it was like 2019, just before the pandemic.
It was pre-pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was probably November 2019, because she's still running. And I think after that she stopped running.
You bring up a good
Like
point,
84.
John. You bring up a good point though about downhill running and the
Yep.
importance of like safety with downhill running. And in that Rachel's run, I don't know if that was the year. So I did a lot of, at one point I did a lot of downhill training
Mhm.
myself with like foot placement and lengthening my gait and dropping my arms and doing this whole like Norwegian Scandinavian approach to going downhill or whatever. So I practiced it a lot. But Rachel's run was like one of the races when I really like saw how if you can do it safely,
Yeah,
you can really make out.
yeah.
Because Rachel's run, it's so steep.
Mhm.
And if you crescent it
And rocky, yeah.
Yeah.
even rocky, but if you can nail the downhill on the opposite side, because you've got to do
Right.
it twice,
Got
right?
that double rise going in, yeah.
That's
It serves as the all-terrain series trail run this year, not
Mm.
cross-country run, but trail run. So it pushes the edge of being a cross-country race. The fact that it's less than 3 miles, a real trail race would be, much longer than that. But you're right. And thinking of Franklin Park as well, if you are, you make a good point, and I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, but that's something to talk about in terms of training for cross country. If you want to be a specific cross country specific skill is downhill running. Because at Franklin Park, coming off of Bear Cage Hill, you've got a nice, good downhill, and I can't run it as aggressively as I used to because of age, but I still try and take advantage of it. If you're young and flexible and you're going to land safely, yes, it is very well worth practicing downhill racing, and how you use it downhill. That's why, talk about cross country as being a series of gear changes, and it's not just one big course. It's a course with little mini sections in it, and you think and prepare for each separate section, and which is, I think, just fascinating and interesting. Yeah.
And one of the other things about cross country and some of the things that to work on, when you're running up the hill, most people kind of slow down. They get to the top and they're slowing down. And if you can run up the hill, go over the top hard and come down, at least the beginning hard, you'll open up a gap on a lot of people who are slowing down and just they're trying to catch their breath as they go up over the top and down the other side. So one of the things to think about is get to the top, run over the top, and then run down at least part of that on the other side, and you'll
Keep your
open up a
momentum.
gap. If you're going to make if you're going to make a definitive gap, then people will get discouraged and they won't go after you.
Well, I used to do that. That used to be my strategy in college.
That's exactly.
I used to do that.
That's exactly right. Very briefly, a classic example of that from my own experiences. When I was living in Atlanta, we used to go, the Atlanta Track Club team that I was running with then, we used to call colleges and see if they would let us into their college meets. And we got to run in a big, huge college meet in Furman, South Carolina. And it was a 10K race. And with about a mile to go, and it's one of these meets where coaches and parents and girlfriends and boyfriends and people are just screaming at the runners all throughout the race. It's just din. And with about a mile to go, we're go up this ascent, and the coach of this guy right in front of me, no, right behind me, yells at the guy. I guess he didn't want his kid to get beat by an old guy like me, because I was like 35 or 36. He says, take this guy on this hill. And the guy charges past me. And I'm just laughing to myself because I said, I'm going to just maintain my effort here, and he's going to come right back to me over the top of that hill, and he'll be gone. It's exactly what happened. I passed him on the crest of the hill and never saw him again. Yeah.
That's a good story.
Yeah, the different strategies. And then, like in road running, you got to cut the tangent, run the tangent. And on cross country, it's the hills, up the hill and down the other side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's drama.
It is. It is.
Drama,
I also think the worse the weather is, the more like excited and animated a lot of cross country runners get.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Two cross country runners, not me.
Weather and courses, it can be great equalizers. You can take a great track runner and put him on a bad weather cross country course, and I mean that's how I became a good cross country runner, because I didn't have the speed for track. but I could run cross country.
Well, it's a little after 8, y'all. Do you want to call it a day or?
Oh, just one quickie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you want to talk
Well,
about your shoes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
do-
yeah. So, at the last cross country race, the shoes came up. People were talking about what shoes to wear, and I had to change my shoes twice because my Achilles was kind of getting a little, it was starting to get a little gnarly on me. But so actually, Nike just came up with a new shoe that has a carbon fiber plate. So, and I think you have it, Anne. So,
No, I don't have any carbon fiber shoes yet.
yeah, but so you can get shoes that have spikes. These are cross-country shoes with typical spikes, or you can get cross-country shoes with no spikes, but that means that you're going to need 2 pairs of shoes. Well, if you don't want to spend the money on 2 pairs of shoes, or you like 1 pair of shoe, and this is what my new shoe came. You have different kinds of spikes. You know, the typical cross-country spikes are these smaller ones, and then you can get like, this is for the Caliche San Antonio running in
For San
trying to get through
Antonio,
that, or muddy course, but no, most of the time you can wear these. But there are things called blanks. So, and that's this flat little, it's basically the same. It doesn't have, it's not raised like a spike. You can see the difference there. It's just flat. And so you can, if you want to not wear a spike, let's say it's like Rachel's run and it's gnarly and kind of bad, you can take your spike out. You put the blank in so it doesn't get dirt inside the hole, and you can use your cross country shoe with or without spikes. So you don't have to buy a second shoe that doesn't have spikes. I had to order these separately, but I got these on Amazon, the blanks. And you can order, I mean, they don't cost a lot. They're really cheap on Amazon.
what is the name of that shoe? Although, what's the brand?
It's a Nike, it's cross country, the new cross country shoe. What's the name? Does it have a
'Cause
name?
I do have Nike cross country shoes, but they're not carbon fiber and they don't.
Yeah, it's the new Dragonfly. It's the
Oh,
absolute,
okay.
it just came out this year, which I'm going to try it out. So I just ordered it because the other ones were they were old and they were starting to annoy my Achilles. And I'm used to running on the track with a carbon fiber plate. So what happens to me is that if I change surfaces or change shoes and different kinds, it kind of irritates my Achilles. So I went from a carbon from running on track to the non-carbon cross country, and it was starting to annoy my Achilles. So I thought this might be more like my track spike, and I'm used to it. And so that's why I decided to buy it. But you can check it out. I don't know if it's I haven't read the reviews seem pretty good, but it's the first year that they've had it. So. But
the Rachel's Run course is not particularly spike friendly, whereas the Brown Bear course is totally spike friendly. So
yes, it is.
go from-
So you can wear these if you get the blanks, you can wear them for any type of course.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got spikes, you got non-spikes.
And just for fun, although they go from the sublime to the ridiculous. I have 2 pair of these. Some people are familiar with them. They're Nike waffle racers. They were state of the art when I got them in 1988. I was living in Atlanta, but I got them from a place in Newmarket, New Hampshire called Olympia Sports. They've got the old waffle iron type sole on them. I only wear them for cross country, but they work really well. They're built like a track shoe, like an old style track shoe. There's basically, you see that looks like a track shoe's last.
They still have the waffle. This is
Yeah.
the newest
Yeah.
waffle.
Yeah,
They haven't
have-
changed the waffle design for their cross country.
I would never recommend these to anybody else, but they're my friend. Mwah.
I had a pair from 1979, and I went into Marathon Sports. I said, I have these for a long time, and I use a new one. And they go, oh wow, that's and they were so they said, oh, it's an antique, and they were like so amazed. Oh,
Well,
It's
when
like
we were
a-
unloading boxes at Vicky's house, and I think you were there, Alder, and I think you brought in this box. It had some really old, like an old track suit and from Liberty, and some old cross country shoes, which had only 3 spikes, and they were in the front, and one of them was like this long. I mean, it was
So-
scary.
Yeah, they're not necessarily cross country. I
Oh.
ran
Mhm.
on cinder tracks in high school,
Mhm.
and we
So
had
it's like a
long
gigantic
spikes. Yeah, yeah.
That's
I
true.
mean, so they weren't necessarily just cross country.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So all of us old people have been chatting away, telling war stories here. Catherine, do you want the last word here? Any questions or points to make?
Oh, I mean, I love cross country and definitely want to do more of it at some point. Yeah, I guess this isn't really cross country related, but I was just gonna ask about like what your favorite marathon was and um more about marathon training, but can save that for another time.
Okay. I have a soft spot. I mean, everybody would say Boston. I have a soft spot for Cal International because that's where I ran my PR and qualified for the trials for the first time under horrible
Yep.
conditions. So that's a memorable one for me. But you know, hard to beat Boston though.
Right.
Hey, I have a question, Alda. Sorry, my computer died while you were talking. You showed the bottom of your spikes. What's up with the triangle? On the bottom of the spikes?
You mean these, the big ones?
Yeah, those are dragonflies, right?
Yeah.
But what's the purpose of the triangle on those?
Oh, for like if you're going through mud, like the European style cross country, that would be a really bad, muddy, really grassy, wet, miserable course. Typically, you wouldn't wear those. You would wear these kind of spikes,
That's what I
the
thought. Yeah.
smaller spikes. But
I've
there
never
was
seen anyone really wear those triangles.
very rare, but there was I ran a race and that was UMass in Amherst, and they purposely made it like a European style, and it was a while ago. I lost my shoe. It got sucked into the mud, and people were taking duct tape and like wrapping it around their shoe to kind of hold it in. And I ran the rest of the course. I went back to look for it, never found it in the mud. It got sucked into this morass of mud. But
You ran it
I
with just one shoe?
can't imagine unless you ran into a European style race. I've never used these bigger ones, but it comes with these two kind of spikes comes with when you buy the shoe. I had to purchase the blank, which I think is you'd use it more often than you would for the bigger one. But these two kinds of spikes came with the shoe.
Yes, coaches with teams in late season where it's likely to be wet or snowy or mucky very often carry a nice fresh roll of duct tape around with them and said, "Hey, put this around your shoe before you go to the starting line."
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
they're hard to get the blanks out, I was wondering. When you,
The blanks are like you need a small like a Phillips head screwdriver, or I just used a little small scissors, and I just tightened it in there. But
Use your teeth.
yeah,
oh boy. And you'll have to have a crown.
yeah, you can't use your spike wrench; it doesn't work on the blade.
That's how I ended up with my first crown. I was cracking nuts with my teeth.
Yeah, that can happen. That can
Not
happen.
a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta go, y'all. Nice
That was
seeing you.
great. Okay, well, thanks. I think we can bring it to a close. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, John.
Can I make one
Sure.
final comment? I thought about this earlier, and I right before we did this, I did a nice hours run over to Arnold Arboretum and back. And if Margaret watches this, I just want to thank her for putting together the cross country themed runs, because it's not something I've talked about a lot, but I was always been aware of it. But since I've been affiliated with Liberty, even more so, that as a man, I am free to run places off road that I wouldn't, women don't and probably shouldn't. And Margaret has made that more accessible for people by getting people together and go off road in wild and crazy places, and it's really good for everyone.
Excellent, a good point.
I'll make sure
Or
Margaret,
not.
she won't have to watch the whole video. I'll tell her.
There you go.
No, it's really important. Last time we were in a wild and crazy Walpole,
I love that place.
which would have been great. Would have been fine anyway, but you're right. That is something that I've thought about too. I don't want to go running through the woods, except, I mean, there's certain places, Cutler Park, whatever, it's always fine. But, a lot of places you'd think, do I really want to be out there for hours? And,
I will say that since COVID, there are a lot more dog walkers out there than there used to be. So places that probably weren't terribly safe before are probably okay now.
mm,
Actually, I go to Mary Cummings Park in Burlington a lot, and I see a lot of people walking dogs, and I like it because it has a nice gravel trail, it's flat, and I try to avoid pavement now, so I use that a lot. It's nice.
And it's fun to run with a group anyway, so.
Yeah, it always is. That's right. That's right.
Okay, well, y'all have a good evening. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you all for
you.
being here. This was fun. I had a good
Fun.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always nice to see friends. And talk about.
Fun
All right,
thing.
we'll see you at Lone Gull.
See you at Lone Gull, on
Bye.
to Gloucester.